Hey, what's going on? Ryan Kohler here, and I have got a really cool tool that I'm going to show you. If you know my backstory, I spent the last 20 years in the HR tech world building what I believe is one of the most innovative applicant tracking systems, specifically when it came to sourcing, job ad, job board optimization, recruitment marketing, everything that had to do with the stuff that wasn't the boring tracking stuff, the stuff that actually drove massive amount of applicants into the applicant pool for a lot of our clients and even for our own internal jobs. We grew from 1 to almost 300 employees in that period of time. We were growing at 30 to 40% year over year over year. So we had to do a ton of hiring ourselves. And one of our honestly not that well kept secrets was our belief that creating great content drove great sourcing, drove great recruitment processes, drove great onboarding processes and employee engagement, all that kind of stuff. If you didn't have great content, then you were just distributing kind of garbage. You sounded just like everybody else. And the challenge with that is that it's really hard to write great content if you're not a content writer, if you're not a marketer, if you're just an HR person, or kind of have that more compliance mindset. So for the past 2 years, I have been, oh my gosh, just like in over my head on ChatGPT with this one simple question: how would HR use ChatGPT to create the content that they need for their recruiting engine, for their onboarding engine, for their culture engine, and their employee engagement and everything in between? While I normally am building, distribution tools and email tools and tracking tools, which I've got some of those coming out. And there's way more stuff you can do with generative AI than just creating content. It all kind of starts with content. The problem is it's really hard. You've got to be a prompt engineer. I'm at 4,000 hours plus of time in ChatGPT. So I started about 6-8 months ago asking myself, well, how could I make it easy? How could I make it friendly? How could I make it so that you don't have to be a prompt engineer to use generative AI? And so I wanted to show you some really cool tools that I've developed. And this very first one is probably the most generic one. It's just an HR work buddy. It's just here to help you with whatever you need. In fact, I programmed it as me, so it's going to be me talking to you through here. But let's jump in and let me show you kind of how it works. Really straightforward. You come in here and you put in your information. I'll show you. I was just running through this a second ago. So I created an account for Sally. So you can see it's going to come back and start talking to you, asking you about what your job is and where you work. Here I work at Applicant Pro, right? It researches your company and pulls that information back in and then says, hey, are you ready to jump in? Let's see what we can work on together. Now, for the most part, I've designed this so it's going to give you options that you could just pick from, but you can always type in literally anything you want if you don't like these 10 options. In this instance, I just went ahead and said, hey, let's do 7. Let's conduct employee satisfaction surveys. And it now comes back and says, great, this is a great thing to do. What is it that you're trying to figure out, right? And so based off of that, you can tell it whatever you want. Maybe you're saying, we want to know if employees are happy, why they love working for us, what their concerns are about the future, especially generative AI. Right? Now, keep in mind, one of the extra tools you'll see me using and going back and forth with is Otter. If you're going to type more than a couple sentences, I personally would suggest using Otter to do a lot of this stuff. I'm going to show you this tool, but if I jump over here and say I want to use Otter as a great example, I use Otter significantly. And the reason I do is it allows me to talk out the answers to these questions and then copy it in. So let me actually show you. And a lot of times I might use this right on my phone. So I'm going to just fire up Otter here really quick and start recording. And so you'll be able to see in a minute here, when I start coming back and working through this, I can say, okay, like it comes back, it says, these are solid goals. Here's a quick recap. Now let's move on to how I can best support you. So when it comes to generative AI, if you want it to work really effectively, number one, you got to tell it what you're working on. Number two, you need to tell it how you want it to help you. So it might say, do you want me to be a consultant, a survey designer, a data analyst, a communication expert? Let's go ahead and say, can you be number 2, right? Will you be my survey designer? Will you help me draft survey questions? Now, most likely it's going to be asking me more and more questions about some of this stuff. And so it's going to take its first draft and put in information about what it already has here, right? It gave me a list of these. Next steps, would you like to tweak? Would you like to add more questions? Would you like to consider a survey format? Clearly, I want it to be, let's do multiple choice, but I want to make sure that the answer options are witty and fun, right? And so now it's going to go ahead and rewrite them and come up with multiple choice questions I can ask instead of fill in the blank. Clearly, when it comes to engagement, right, this is going to help to get my employees to engage. Ooh, it's only giving me 4 options. Maybe I want it to give me 5 options. So I could say, could you give me 5 options and assign a score to each one? Now, I was telling you about Otter, right? And Otter is a phenomenal tool. If you want to use it, I have a link that gives you free pro for a period of time, but you can even just use the free version. But so now you can see it's starting to actually create these questions with scores, with some type of a scoring algorithm that goes with it, right? Super, super cool, right? Now, if I needed to put more information in here, so what do you think? Would you like to make any adjustments or deep dive into any specific questions, right? So at this point, I could say, well, it's only 5 questions. That's actually probably not a terrible one, but maybe I want to say, could we make it 10? And it's now going to redo that. Now, back to Otter. If I don't want to type this out, I could come over here to Otter and you can see that my phone is actually transcribing as I'm talking. And so a lot of times, here you can see it right here, I'll use my phone to answer these questions. And then I'll stop, and copy and paste it and stick it back in. Or I might actually take an entire transcript. If I actually stop this recording, I could go back and pull an entire transcript from a meeting, from anything like that, and then push it back in. The reason why this is so important isn't just that it's easier than typing, okay? It's not that it'll save you time, although it will. The reason why the concept of recording is so important is because you will give it way more of yourself than you would otherwise. So this is just a really great example of how you could use generic work buddy here. I could go back, I could start a new conversation. I'll actually show you one of the cool parts about this is that if I start a new chat, and once again, I always am going to start with what's your name, and you tell it your name, it's going to actually remember things about me. So I've created a set of things to remember about what it is. It knows I'm in HR, right? It should remember parts of this. This is a brand new tool, right? And so as it starts, oh, it's probably because I didn't finish that other conversation. When you come back in, it's going to remember who you are. Look, it remembers where I work. It remembers all that information. And so then I could jump into a project and start all over again. This is just a phenomenal generic tool that's going to set up generative AI in a way that you would have to be a prompt engineer to really be able to set it up this way. And it's super, super easy. It's also free to use. So you can log in and use it for free. I've got some structured user setups for it. You can just use it with no account a few times. If you set up an account, which is just a matter of logging in, it means it will store this information for you and you get a certain number of uses per month for free. And then there's some upgrades so that if you want to use more tools and more usage per month, you can expand it from there. But I hope that you can see that this is a great way to kind of dip your toe in the water. One last note on this so that you understand. If you haven't watched my Is It Safe to Use in HR videos, you should go check them out. But this is a safe tool to use. What I mean by safe is, number one, this is running through the OpenAI API. That means nothing that you load in here is going to be added to their language model. So the S in safe, secure, this is a secure way for you to be engaging. Clearly, I still wouldn't load up people's social security numbers just because I don't think it's smart to do that unless you have a real need for it. But you don't have to worry that this is being added to their model and being used by your competitors or anything like that. but just a really great tool that's kind of going to put the bumpers on like you're bowling. It's going to put those bumpers on so that you don't like get a gutter ball. It's going to guide you through the entire process. Clearly, if you have any questions, you can hit me up. You can reach me at heyryan@Refer.io. You should see the email on the bottom of this video. Otherwise, I'll talk to you again soon, and I would love to hear your feedback about this really cool new tool.